Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And it has been requested that Ms. Grindstaff lead us in that.
Really?
Yes.
I'm the tallest one that's ever done it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have the minutes from our last meeting, which was June 30th of 2016. I think first opportunity to review those has been at the table, so look them over and I'll entertain a motion.
I move a motion to accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that was unanimous. Public comments. Anyone from the public here to approach the podium and make any comments for us?
Have Bill use the microphone, please.
Turn it a little, yeah. Thank you. Okay, public comments. Once again, anyone from the public here to address the airport board with any matters of airport business? Not seeing anyone approach the podium or giving any indication from the audience. Turn the meeting over to Luis, and we are on discussion and possible action on airport schedule of rates and charges.
Good afternoon, Board. Acting Chairwoman. The first item for today's agenda is the schedule of rates and charges. City Council asked us to change these every 3 years. The last time it was approved by the board was May 2014, and Council approved it in July 2014. Again, all the rates are based on appraised fair market value or comparable airports. The ones that I'm going to show you now, I've just listed the ones that we changed or the ones that are new. The ones that are yellow all the way across are new rates. The ones that are yellow just on the right side are the proposed rates. We'll start with the existing non-aeronautical facilities. Our T-hangar units have, by the shape of the T-hangar in a rectangular building, we have storage units at the end. Lindsay Jansen, our new finance analyst across the way, has done extensive research, and we've come up with an average rate off-site in San Angelo of $141 a month for the size of the units that we have. That's 43 cents a square foot. So we're recommending for units C, D, E, and F that do not have a garage door on them, $90 a month. And for the ones with a garage door, although they're smaller, they do have a garage door and they offer more flexibility to the tenants. We're recommending $120 per month on unit. Do you want me to go through all of them and then come back, or do you, if you have questions, you can stop me, but I'll go through all of them if you want. Okay. The next one is the FBO permitted use. This rate was set at $125 in 2007. It has not been raised for the past 10 years. We're at 26% of the appraised fair market value, and we recommended a $1.30 increase, which is the CPI increase from 10 years ago. T-hangar units, those were raised, the 44 units were raised 3 years ago to $200 a month. The average, if you look on the right, is $251.33 for the average airports, and we're recommending $205. For the 60-foot executive hangar units, those have not increased in 10 years. Last time, we were close to that $260 comparable airports. This go-around, the average comparable airports is $361, so we're recommending $300. Next slide. overnight aircraft fee, and this one applies to the commercial air carrier aircraft. We had $8 per night per plane per month. We're recommending $12 per night per plane per month, and if you look at the comparable airports, the average is $35.40. Fuel flowage, those were increased 3 years ago. I'm recommending a half a cent increase to 0.085, and we're 25% below average and almost 11 cents for comparable airports on fuel flowage. The conference room rental, that was done by the finance department, and city council approved it under ordinance, so we just added it to their schedule and rates and charges. No changes there, still per ordinance. A new rate, our staff is doing the above wing operations for air charters. That means anything in the terminal, the ticketing, and the FBOs handle the below wing, which is the fueling and the baggage handling. We've been doing it per hour. Lindsay has done some calculations, and we're asking for the air charters that have seating capacity of 70 or less, 1,545 per charter. That means a return, a departure, and an arrival. And for the larger aircraft of 71 seats or more, $2,000.79. Average comparable airports is $3,051 for the same service. Next page, rental car company. The MAG, or minimum airport guarantee, has been $1,000 well before my time, over 10 years ago. None of the rental car companies are averaging less than the MAG. They're averaging $3,700 per month. So we're recommending to increase the minimum guarantee to $2,000 from $1,000 per month. And the landing fee rates, we have two rates. We're doing away with, this is only for commercial aircraft. Airlines are not using turboprops anymore, so we're recommending to go into 75 cents. Again, the average comparable airports is $1.25. So we're 60% below. And I believe that's it. I'll be happy to answer any questions, me and Lindsay or Mitch.
Just one question. What are the comparable airports you're utilizing?
Lindsay, can you mention those, please?
We surveyed 23 airports. They range from GA airports to similar airports in size to San Angelo Regional Airport. Depending on any of the specific items that we have different data. So we had some airports that were able to provide fuel flowage, but were unable to provide information for charters.
But can you identify some of those airports for us?
Yes, we have Abilene, Addison, Grand Prairie, Killeen, Lubbock, Preston, Smith International, Roswell, Spinks, and Stillwater Regional.
Okay.
So on the T hangars, what kind of vacancy rate do you have?
We're completely full.
Okay.
We have a waiting list.
On the charters, you said that rate is for a departure and arrival. So why is it just for a departure? Is it that people use the same amount of time spent for either?
We've calculated all of our staff time and all the costs per jet bridge, et cetera. So we've calculated it to one fee. So the airlines that pick up will return. It's not just a departure. There will be an arrival bringing back customers. So we just did it for one fee, as one fee.
Okay, and the landing fee, is that just for the airlines?
That is for any commercial large aircraft, yes.
Okay.
Charters pay the landing fee too.
Charters do too, in
Yeah.
addition to this fee?
Yes.
Okay. So whether it be Ranger or Skyline that helps out, that's a separate, they charge them separately.
The FBOs handle the below wing rates with those airlines, correct?
Okay.
Was there any discussion about going up higher on the T-hangers?
I'm recommending this. Last time staff brought this to the board recommended going up depending on items. I recommended $300 for the 60-foot T-hangers because we have not raised them in 10 years. Last time it was kind of comparable to the average. And the 40-foot hangers, we did go up from 150 to 200 3 years ago. So I'm only recommending $5, even though the average is $251. But if the board directs staff to do it, we'll be more than happy to.
I was just looking at the difference in the I guess it's the storage area, not the T-hanger, but the storage area.
The storage area going up higher?
Yeah, I guess I would ask, sort of from a philosophical perspective, are you trying to stay under other airports?
Well, the
As
storage.
we compete for business?
The storage area will be competing with storage areas in San Angelo, not other airports.
Do you currently have any of those storage areas leased? Okay.
That makes sense.
We've had interest, but
Okay. And what kind of rate did you come up with for that? Do you know? For years? Okay.
now we're basing it on square footage, and we've had interest on those units too.
Okay. So you'd make your T-hanger lessees aware that the storage areas were available because they would be the most likely
Yeah.
people
And
to
we've
want to
had
rent them.
tenants, old, former tenants, give up those units, and now we have a range of units.
And what are the restrictions on those? How can they use them?
Anything that will not be flammable, same restrictions that the T-hangers would have. Of course, you can't put an aircraft, but you can store unprotected fuels, et cetera. So those requirements will be the same in a lease form.
Do you have people that are waiting to get in those?
Yes.
Good.
And we've held them back until we brought the rates to you and then to council.
So your rental car companies are currently averaging payment to the airport $3,700 a month?
Correct. As a good example on this one, Abilene Airport's director called me and said, "What is your MAG? What is your minimum airport guarantee?" And I told him it was $12,000 a year. He said, "Oh, mine is 60, and we're thinking of going up." So the rental car companies haven't met that minimum in a long time. So I'm just going up $1,000 a month, so doubling it. Again, they're paying the percentage of gross, not the minimum. And the rental car companies that we have will stay with their current lease until a new lease negotiation happens. So
When you talked to Abilene, did they have a percentage that they're charging?
10% also,
They're 10% or
Yes.
60?
or 60,000
Wow,
per year.
okay.
And they're thinking of going up to 70 or 75.
Are all your desks full at the
Yes.
rental counters?
And we've had, now that everybody's full and all the spaces are filled, we've had interest for another national company that wanted to come in. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wait until the lease
So
runs
even
out.
dropping down to 3 flights a day hasn't changed the revenue in a negative?
It has increased, actually.
Figure that one out. It's a good problem.
And later on in the presentation, we're also going to talk about airline schedules too.
Any other questions from the board?
Would you like a motion to approve? Are you asking for an action today?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Lou, if we approve, when do you plan on taking this to the council?
I think it's kind of quick to take it on the 12th, probably the first meeting in January. And again, we have left off, I am trying to get a consultant for airline leases to redo our airline leases. So the airline rates are not in here, only the charter rates are included.
Okay. Ms. Grindstaff, was that a motion on your part, or?
If you would like one, I'll
Yes.
make a motion to approve the recommended schedule of rates and charges.
And is there a second? Second. Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Didn't hear anyone opposed? Any opposed? Then unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, next would be discussion on taxiway reconfiguration project.
Mitch, would you like to take this one, please?
Good afternoon, Board. We will be beginning our taxiway reconfiguration project on January 4th, the one we've been discussing, it seems like the past couple of years. During this process, we're going to have some temporary closures out on our airfield. Biggest impacts are going to be the closure of 1836 and 927, 1836 being our primary runway. And we're going to have it closed for 92 calendar days. And the reason for this is the vicinity of the construction along that runway. It's inside the runway safety areas. And the scheduled time frame for this project is 189 days, through July 12th. Getting ahead of me on there.
I just went to the map, sorry.
Oh, I can get that at the end if you like. So, yeah, through that time we'll have some realignments on the airfield. We've already reached out to our tenants on the airfield about the temporary closures. We had a pre-construction meeting a few weeks ago with the control tower, the contractor, the engineer, and within the next few months we'll be reaching out again about the temporary closures on the airfield during the project.
Before we start construction, we will have another major meeting with everybody.
Next slide. Contractor for the project will be Reese Albert. Engineer, designer was KSA Engineering. And the total project cost was $3.2 million. All of this was funded 90% with the federal grant, AIP money, and then the local match was with passenger facility charge money. The finished product, we will have 2 new taxiways with paved shoulders, lights, and signage. We'll have new apron islands with lights and signage as well. There's several asphalt repairs along the apron edge where the concrete meets our asphalt. There's certain repairs that need to be done, so those will be taken care of on this project. We'll have new markings on our air carrier apron as well as along the ramp. And then we'll also have a new airfield lighting control computer that our air traffic control tower staff can utilize. And as far as the phasing, kind of what Lou was showing earlier, I mean, the first phase is going to focus on these taxiways here, the removal of taxiway Charlie right here, the removal of taxiway Echo, and then this is the new Echo right here, and the new taxiway Charlie will be over here. And then the phase 2 will primarily focus on these apron islands. And then there's several asphalt repairs that need to be done along the ramp here. So throughout this process, like I mentioned earlier, for our operators, there will be closures. We're going to have to redirect some aircraft. So we're taking a lot of precautions. We're going to be working together closely with our contractor, our engineer, to make sure the airfield is safe and operable. So any questions you may have, I'm happy to answer.
Has the military been advised, particularly of the north-south runway being closed?
Yes. I've sent letters out to Laughlin, Randolph, as well as Shepherd, and had some dialogue yesterday with some people from Laughlin, so they're well aware.
Any
Will
questions?
KSA have a site manager or someone to keep the inspections
Yes, ma'am.
daily, weekly, current?
We'll have a project representative on site.
The FAA is paying for 40 hours a week for an inspector.
Discussion? Okay, discussion on pavement prioritization project. Is that Mitch again, or?
Nope. It's
Nope,
going to
that's
be me and KSA planners. Let me give you a quick background on this project. I visited the FAA a few months back at the beginning of the mid-year, and we were talking about our future capital improvement projects. And at that meeting, I was told that the FAA will no longer fund a third runway. So we needed to take a look at that and come up with a plan. We've contracted with KSA planners. Molly Waller, chief planner for KSA, is here. She's out of Kansas City, and she has prepared a presentation for you with alternatives, and I'll let her take it. Molly?
Good afternoon, Molly Waller with KSA Engineers. As Lou said, I run our planning group. Today, the purpose of the presentation is to summarize the inventory and the analysis we've done regarding the runway usage. A big part of that was the pavement management plan that the airport undertook in 2016 and 2017. As part of the pavement management plan, the condition of the various runways and airfield surfaces was inventoried, and I'm not advancing. Oh, there we go. A PCI, or Pavement Condition Index, was prepared for each of the surfaces. So when you're evaluating the runways and the usages and the needs, you want to take into account the current condition of the pavement. As you will see in 2017, this year, runway at 1836 is green, which means that you simply need to keep it green. Seal it, crack seal it, do seal coats, things like that. Runway 321 is getting into the yellow, and then you'll see runway 927 is red. If it's red, that means that some pretty significant repairs need to be undertaken. This was the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, that came out of your pavement management plan. And you'll see in the short term, there were projects planned on all three runways. 1836 and 321 were a simple crack seal, seal coat, and remark, where runway 927 was a 3-inch mill and overlay and a partial reconstruct. And that is where the FAA indicated we're no longer likely going to be able to fund 3 runways at the airport. We need you to go back and look at your runways and assign the classifications. The Airport Improvement AIP Handbook assigns 4 types of runways. And this is just some background so you can kind of see why we did the analysis that we did. Every airport gets a primary runway, and that is the runway that is usually your most sophisticated runway at an airport. A crosswind runway is fundable by the FAA if your wind coverage is less than 95%. So that means that if the winds are in line with your runway designation, for 95% of the time, you get 1 runway. If it's below 95% of the time, you get a crosswind runway. So that's where your second runway comes in. A third runway can occur in 2 different conditions. The first one is if it's a capacity related. If you're at a DFW or a very busy airport where you really need the 2 runways so you can have aircraft arriving and departing at the same time or slightly staggered, that would be a secondary runway. An additional runway is exactly what it says. It's an additional runway that's needed to serve some user at the airport. There's airports that have 4 or 5 runways, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the additional runway is exactly what it says. When you look at this column, I like this trace thing. The first 3 primary, crosswind, and secondary are eligible for funding, which means you can get FAA grants. 90% of those projects can be funded if justified. Again, you have to justify your crosswind runway or secondary runway. This additional runway is ineligible. So, can you erase my circle? The first thing we looked at for San Angelo Regional Airport was a wind analysis. And again, that was to assess the wind characteristics of the airport. We look at 10 years of wind data. And as it says on this sheet, the FAA recommends that airports have at least 95% wind coverage. This is the wind rose that is created. The red box is essentially all of the winds that are taken care of by 1836. The green box are all of the winds that are covered by 321. And the blue box are all the winds that are covered by 927. These outlying symbols out here in the triangles are simply events that there's currently no wind coverage for. So that's what the windrows is. And this is the results. When you look at all three of your runways, at 10.5 knots, you have 99.5% wind coverage. That's almost 100% wind coverage. And the 10.5 knots, that's the small guys. That's the tail draggers. At 13 knots, you have even better wind coverage at 99.85%. Those are your larger GA aircraft. And then at 16 knots, you've got almost 100% wind coverage. That's with all three of your runways. So knowing that you're going to only possibly get to have FA support 2 runways, you have to decide which runway do you want to serve. We're going to assume that 1836 will always remain in existence. It's currently your most sophisticated airport. It's located in close proximity to the terminal. So in seeking FAA funds, you've got 2 other runways to look at. You've got 321 and you've got 927. So these 2 tables down here at the bottom show your wind coverage under the 2 scenarios. The one on the left shows your wind coverage if you have runways 1836 and runway 321. And you'll see we're above the 95% coverage that the FAA requires, so that third runway can fall out. You still have excellent coverage with 321 and 1836. It is slightly better with 1836 and 927 because of the alignments and where the winds are, so it's slightly better. So that would draw you to a conclusion of, well, 927 is a better runway. However, you also have to look at these runways independently. There are situations where that primary runway is going to be closed as it is for your taxiway project, and you need to make sure your secondary runway can accommodate those users. When you look at 1836 all alone, here's the wind coverage. And again, to show you, this is that 94.45 that signifies we could justify a crosswind. Runway 321, these are the wind coverage for 321. And you can see you've got pretty good wind coverage with that runway all by itself. 927 is a problem. If 1836 is closed for an extended period of time for construction or you're relying solely on 927, you've only got 79.14% wind coverage with that single runway. So it kind of tells a different story when you're looking at them independently, but you do need to look at that scenario also. Other factors that we want to take into consideration are your instrument approaches. Currently, San Angelo Regional has 9 published instrument approaches. Those approaches are solely to 1836 and 321. There are no instrument approaches to runway 927. Runway 927 is your least sophisticated runway. You also have a hotspot situation with runway 927. There are 2 hot spots at the intersections with taxiway Alpha and taxiway Bravo. So when you consider all of these factors, what we're recommending is that runway 1836 be classified as a primary runway. The runway 321 be classified as your crosswind runway, and again, that's primarily because it's a more sophisticated runway than runway 927, and it can operate independently from what 927 should, or from 1836, should 1836 need to be closed. That would then leave runway 927 to be classified as your additional runway by the FAA. Again, under this situation, runways 1836 and 321 would be eligible for AIP funding assistance at 90%. Runway 927 would not. We then went into 3 airfield alternatives that we wanted to present to you. The first one is the closure of runway 927 and the extension of taxiway hotel. This provides the airport with a tremendous benefit. As I mentioned earlier, this is your most sophisticated from an instrument approach standpoint runway. There is a design standard that says that an instrument runway should have a full-length parallel taxiway. And so by closing runway 927 and then constructing the parallel taxiway to replace, 927 is also used as a taxiway, so you have to replace that. I should have mentioned that earlier. You would replace your access down to the apron area by extending hotel, and this does assume runway 927 is closed. The second alternative is the conversion of runway 927 to taxiway hotel. So this would become hotel all the way down. That's your second alternative of what could be done on the airfield. This one I would caution, while the FAA, they get their They're triggers. They wanted all the runway safety areas corrected a while back. Now they're focused on runway protection zones. So they're always finding new standards to enforce at airports. By not having a full-length parallel or as much of a parallel runway you can get to 321, it could still result in a project or a need later on. So if the funds were spent to convert 927 to taxiway hotel, it may not be a permanent solution for hotel. The final alternative, oh, I have the clicker, is the rehabilitation of runway 927. Runway 927 is going to require a mill and overlay in the near term and a full reconstruct at some point in the future based on the pavement management plan. The additional runway, being 927, is the responsibility of the local airport sponsor, and the anticipated short-term cost is $2.33 million. And so that would be only for that mill and overlay to improve that runway surface. Funding sources. Alternative one, should you close 927 and extend taxiway hotel, the FAA would pay for the bulk of that. It would be AIP eligible. It would compete well for funds because it's an instrument runway, and they would pay up to 90% with that local match through your PFCs of 10%. Alternative two, should you convert runway 927 to a taxiway, again, the FAA would likely assist with funding that project upwards of 90% with that 10% local match through PFCs. Alternative three, the rehabilitation of runway 927, it would have to be funded locally. So it would be local on airport funding through increased rates and charges, increased fees. City general fund is an option. And then you've also got the sale of bonds, essentially creating a debt situation. So that's a lot of information. I will say this is not a unique situation at all. In the Southwest FAA region, there are a number of airports that have had this exact same conversation with the FAA, and they've been in the same situation that St. Angelo is as far as what's going to happen with the runways, knowing that the FAA can only support two.
Clear. The first alternative, the FAA is picking up the tab for 90% under the AIP, correct?
Correct. Likely, I don't want to commit them. The conversation hasn't, none of this has been shared with the FAA at this point in time.
But it's eligible.
It comes on the AIP program.
Yes.
Yes.
Potentially.
It's eligible.
The rehab of 927 is strictly city monies.
That's
Correct.
correct. Because it is classified, we're recommending it be considered your additional runway, which makes it not eligible for
927,
funding.
of course, rehab, and I mean, there's no instrument procedure to 927 whatsoever.
No, that's correct.
So I guess the question is operationally, on alternative one and two, what would be best fit for the tenants or customers, Louis?
Looking at the extension of a parallel taxiway to the primary runway, which is an instrument runway, I would recommend alternative one because it does give us a parallel taxiway to that instrument runway. We don't know if we go with alternative two, like Molly said, in the future, the FAA may say, you're going to lose that instrument runway now, the approach to the instrument runway, because you do not have that parallel.
Can we still keep runway, convert 927 to a taxiway and keep that, or will we shut it, will we
We would have to
completely-
shut it off, sir.
Completely?
Yes, sir.
If you do alternative one, where you fully extend hotel, to keep 927 as a taxiway, you would have to spend money on it, and the FAA wouldn't support that. Because right now, it's in a condition where in a few years, it's gonna need work.
Even as a taxiway?
Correct.
Correct. Because this alignment is essentially mitigation for this lost connection. I fly in and out of your airport quite a bit, and it's used as a taxiway, I think sometimes more than a runway. But the new taxiway would be considered mitigation for the loss of that pavement.
What you're saying, if we don't do alternative one, the FAA may come down and say, hey, because you don't have a parallel runway, we're going to close runway.
Parallel taxiway,
Parallel taxiway, we're going to close 321, or we're not going
no,
to
we
support
would
it.
lose the
funding.
ILS, the approach to
You
it.
might
Oh,
temporarily lose some
because
approaches.
that will lose a lot of military committee and a lot of people. I mean, we have a lot of training going on.
Well, and I will say, whenever the FAA, they have, and I don't know if you're familiar with the mandate to correct all runway safety areas, they did give a period of time to do that. So it's not as if they turn off the lights on that, the approaches for that runway that day. They would just simply say, you need to construct as much of a parallel as you can get. The only challenge is if you go with alternative 2, I forgot how I clear my lines.
Advance the slide.
My scribbles. If alternative 2 would be selected and you go ahead and you construct this, you've got funds that have gone into this situation, and then you're gonna have to go back and put more funds to correct for the instrument approaches. And and I don't wanna say the FAA is gonna mandate that, but it is a design standard. It is in the airport design advisory circular that says, thou shalt have a parallel taxiway. It just takes one aircraft accident, and that's how FAA decides what they're gonna fix next.
And just to give you some frame, if you want to keep the runway open, our budget at the airport is 1.4 million. So if I need to find 2.33 million, those rates and charges that you just approved would have to go up considerably. And meeting with Michael Dane, and he's here, and I'd like him to come up and explain bond sales and all that debt service and stuff.
Molly, you said that there's hotspots, taxiway Bravo and Alpha. Why would Alpha be a hotspot?
The connection to the taxiway direct from ramps. Those are runway incursion mitigations. Those have always been a hotspot from Alpha to the runway.
Okay, I see. Oh, yeah, all right, now that part's closed, okay.
What's the definition of a hot spot?
A potential runway incursion where a plane may access the runway without clearance and causing a midair or potential midair, collision on the runway.
And that's been a focus of late also with the FAA. They're doing a bunch of runway incursion mitigation RIM studies at airports. Fortunately, San Angelo's not hit that threshold, but incursions are something that the tower is aware of and that they have to deal with on a daily basis to make sure they don't occur.
If we were to consider investing $2.3 million in that runway rehab, Lou estimated that the life of those improvements might be 10 years. That would be the maximum we'd want to finance that for. So if we borrowed approximately that amount of money and financed it for 10 years, at the end of that 10 years, they're talking about a bigger reconstruction type rather than mill and overlay project. We'd be starting right back into that round of borrow, reconstruct, and then finance. And absent some new funding source, that would be on the backs of, if you desired for that to be paid for from airport revenues, that'd be on the backs of those, Lou mentioned those rates and charges you just talked about. If we raised those approximately 20%, that'd get you in the ballpark for what that debt service would be. You couldn't do that overnight. I mean, that first year you'd have a debt service payment of $250,000 to $300,000. You couldn't raise the rates that fast. You might change that chart that fast, but as you're aware, those tenants have contracts and they're protected from significant rate increases by the terms in those contracts. So it would take us a while to get those rates and charges up high enough to service that debt. Once again, like nearly everything we do at the city, it becomes a cost-benefit battle for what we choose to do.
You go back to that alternative 1 chart.
Thank you, Michael.
If we do away with 927, what becomes Alpha taxiway? It stops right there at the ramp where we can't use it now because the planes are being stored?
Correct.
So is there any way that you could just...
We can, and actually in communications with the FAA, they would allow us to keep that section from Bravo to Alpha, that little section there, open for that purpose.
Okay, so that would become Alpha then there.
It would become a taxiway. I don't know what designation it would be.
Because, you know, I see now the customs, they use 927 to get to
Taxi.
Alpha right
Yes.
now,
They can go this way, or they can come this way.
right?
Question on 927 again, which is the third, looks like worst alternative in my opinion. But what would be the anticipated weight-bearing classification of that runway if you did construct it with that city money?
Mitch, do you know the weight bearing on 927 currently?
In other words, would it be capable of handling the same aircraft that
Negative.
1836?
No.
And so really, it's just money down the drain in a way.
Correct.
Thank you.
It's not even 130.
It is a 139, but it's for light aircraft only.
Oh, it's a
category.
139?
Yeah.
Okay.
One other thing that is a result of if 927 is closed, and that is right now you've got trapezoidal shapes off the end of this runway that are called runway protection zones. You've also got approach surfaces that are protected. If 927 is removed from the equation, it does allow for additional development along that apron, which is of benefit to the airport because you guys are getting pretty full. And so real estate's going to become prime, and instead of going out and starting another apron complex for hangars, you'd be able to do some infill in that area. So that's one benefit, so to speak, of that runway going away. Just for some examples, if you're curious, other airports that have been in similar situations, Monroe, Louisiana, similar sized airport to San Angelo. They are in the process of closing one of their runways. They're done the environmental, they're getting ready to permanently close it. The Albuquerque Sunport has lost a runway. So those are a couple. It's not at all uncommon considering the current AIP level that the FAA has. They don't have as many dollars, they don't stretch as far.
Ms. Chair, if you like this, since we have KSA planners here and we made this a public hearing, if you take public comments, we'll appreciate it on this particular item after your discussion.
Any further questions from board members? Okay, anyone from the public care to comment or question either board or staff on this issue? Any public comment? Any public questions? I see no one indicating any further interest in this. Do you need a recommendation from
Yes.
us? Are you looking for a
I would
consensus?
ask for two things. Do you want us to have another public meeting prior to going to council? Or do you want us to go to council with a recommendation from the board? And at council, this could be a public hearing too, but we set up the contract with public hearings.
Let me ask you this. Have you visited with your most frequent users at the airport and gotten any input from them?
No, this is the first time that we're presenting it. We just finished the study, and we chose the board meeting to present it first and have public hearing on it. We can address it with tenants and hold.
Would perhaps a hearing on airport premises be more convenient
We
for?
would be happy for it.
Okay. Then my suggestion would be that we do have an additional public hearing on airport property so that the tenants feel like they have a convenient location and manner of providing input before you take this to council.
We'll be happy to.
Board
No,
agree
I
or
agree. If the
disagree with
tenants-
that?
If not many or no tenants have been aware of this, been briefed on this.
Correct. And the way,
It's educational as well.
yes,
It's an
and the way we set up the contract, we had two.
Can this board right now make a recommendation, though? A tentative
Absolutely.
recommendation?
There's
Yes.
no action item on the agenda.
Recommendation can be made to staff.
Move that we recommend alternative one.
Is there a second?
I would second the recommendation.
All in favor? Or any discussion first?
Ed, you look like you had discussion.
No, I'm just gonna, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
We will look at a
Unanimous
date.
recommendation.
We will look at a date and set up a public hearing at the airport in the conference room to discuss this issue. And then after that, if nothing changes from the board, we'll proceed to council. This is the first step. If council decides to go ahead and close runway 927, the second step is, if that is the case, we will take a look at what the mayor wants is look at possible development on the land side. A business park is what she's calling it, but we want to take it step by step.
I just have one more question. Why don't we just, why does 3 and 2 1 have to be considered a crosswind runway, not a secondary runway? Is there a reason for that? Is that, I mean, if they're allowing 2 runways, we get the same funding for both runways, wouldn't we?
You, and I apologize, this is a little bit hard to read. When you look at the table of secondary runway, you have to be operating at capacity. You have to be at 60% your capacity for it to qualify and to be justified and eligible for funding. And at the current operational level at San Angelo, it could not be considered a secondary runway. The FAA would not accept that. They would accept the crosswind runway to get you up to that 95% wind coverage.
Okay, I see.
So they would likely determine it's not eligible, it's not justified.
Just to let you know, DFW is not even at capacity on their current runway, so.
Felt like it this morning.
Okay, so is that all you need from us as of now on that item? Okay,
Thank you.
then director's report. Thank you very much for your presentation.
I just want to go through statistics for 2016 versus 2015. Very negative numbers and differences. Loss in air traffic, loss in fuel flowage, loss in passengers. We were up in load factor. We went from 72% to 75%, but at that time we had 4 flights per day through American Airlines. And the rental car was kind of even. We were 0.01% down. So for the first 3 quarters in 2017, we're up 12% in traffic, 0.4% in fuel flowage. Passengers have gone down 5%, but my expectation is that the holidays can bring those up, maybe to around 60,000. Our load factor is through the roof at 82%, up 11% over the same time period last year. And our rental car revenue has increased by 10%, so we're doing a lot better this year than we were last year. I do want to go over the American Airlines schedule. Up until November 9th, we had 3 flights on CRJ 700, 65 seats per plane. Total daily seats at 195 per day. Starting November 9th, American Airlines changed their schedule to 4 flights per day, giving us 224 available seats per day. In December 15th, we will have 5 flights per day for the holidays, all with ERJ 140s. Those are 44 seating capacity aircraft. Those are the ones that have been stored at the airport for the longest time. American Airlines has taken them back and putting them back to service and bringing it to our market. So we will have 220 available seats starting December 15th. But then right after the holidays, January 8th, we go back down to 4 flights per day, bringing down our available seats per day to 176 seats, but giving us 4 options versus 3. And I do want to let you know, then Ms. Kreinstaff has sat on it, we have created, at the direction of council, we created an air service working group, and we've met quite heavily this year. And that's one of the reasons that I haven't been able to meet with you. I've been dealing with that group a lot, and I apologize for that. But we have 2 members of the board sitting on that group. Liz, before as vice president of Texas Pacifico, and Fred Key as chamber member and part of the board too. But we've had 10 folks throughout San Angelo, prominent folks, 2 council members and 1 mayor sitting on that group, and we're very in tune on what American Airlines is doing and are trying to progress. Fortunately, American Air saw the error in their ways, I think, a little bit and brought back the 4th flight. So, however, we do have less capacity by having 4 flights.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how the community behaves with that, because I think the message has been more choice, more time, opportunity. So here we have it, but we've given up capacity in that. So
And-
hopefully this will meet local industry needs as we've been hearing from them.
And a lot of when American changed aircraft and 3 flights back in May, a lot of the complaints were I'd lost frequency. I needed more frequencies, not only from businesses. But now that they've switched back to adding that 6 p.m. flight, what I'm hearing, and I have 2 complaints already of folks missing that first-class service, because this aircraft will not have first-class service.
It was only
So-
worth one drink.
And
mean,
I
they
needed
couldn't
to do
any
something
more
with
it
American
than that
Airlines
anyway.
to bring back that first-class
Yeah,
service again.
You couldn't really take big advantage of it. Well, but this, for a lot of people that are traveling, I mean, depending, if you're business traveling, this gives us a better chance of getting home in and out in on the same day. So now we just need to make sure we're using it and not
And the same
driving
planes,
elsewhere.
again, that they parked because of lack of pilots are back. So they must have found a lot of pilots because they're flying them again. Any questions on any of that? And I do thank you for allowing me the time, sorry, that I had to deal with the Air Service Working Group, and I spent a lot of time with them. But we're going to start our meetings regular again, quarterly.
They've been rather demanding, haven't they?
Yes, you have. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. I do want to introduce Lindsay Jansen. She's sitting right over there. I think I did it earlier, our new finance analyst, business and finance analyst. And that is it for my report.
Any future agenda items from board members? Anything you'd like to see addressed on the next agenda?
I would recommend a meeting in February, 3 months from now. If you can start looking at your calendars and letting Janice know. I think we want to meet on Thursdays. I think one board member cannot make Wednesdays. So if we can meet on Thursdays, that would be great. That's it.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you.
It's interesting.
Meeting adjourned.